Welcome to the Longevity Protocol with Dr. Christina Bosch and Dr. John A. Robinson. We'll be your guides to uncovering the secrets to optimal health, better sex, and happiness. From debunking aging myths to exploring the science behind what it means to live the Longevity Protocol, we'll dive into a wide range of topics. So, get ready for an exhilarating journey in what it means to live well and feel your very best at any age. The Menopausal Matrix Part 2. Dispelling the myths and menopausal advocacy. In our last episode, we talked about just menopause in general. We got into even some of the spirituality behind it. What does it mean? What are the symptoms? How do we handle that? What are all the conditions that are kind of related around it? And it's a big problem. I mean, obviously, we got into details about that, but this is a national problem. It's a global problem, at least particularly in developed countries, but it's a problem here in the US, and we need to advocate more for it. We need to educate more about menopause, perimenopause, hormonal issues, and the proper and safe and effective use of estrogen and testosterone therapy for women. And we have interestingly already been doing that. We've been advocating by being directly in the trenches with women and for women for 2 decades. And it's just, we've seen this huge resurgence or sort of renaissance rebirth of that. Maybe not even rebirth, just might be this birth of this idea. I don't think
it's a rebirth.
Yeah, it's just.
I mean, I don't think it's a rebirth, because I think even when we think of a time perhaps where there was more wisdom from the crone, as we mentioned in the previous episode, women's menopausal experiences back then are not what they are today. So really, this is the first time where we're having, in developed countries, as you mentioned, menopause is a disease instead of just a state.
And that therefore there's options for that, and that we should advocate for those options.
Right.
We need to advocate for doctors being educated to understand what the options are and provide those to women. It's so incredibly important.
And we need to encourage women to talk about these things. I mean, I know women, one of the characteristics of females is they tend to cluster up and commiserate. But menopause isn't necessarily something that everyone talks about, in part because I don't think they know that it's a symptom they shouldn't be experiencing. So that's one of the things.
Or they don't know there's answers, so they say, well, I got to live with it. And eventually you just resign to this idea that I got to live with it, even when you're commiserating with your friends.
Yeah.
Until you find that one friend that comes into the group that says,
have you heard of the sex dogs?
Yes. Have you gone?
Which, a joking aside is essentially what happens, right? Like, I just recently met with an amazing group of women. It was a quick group of women. It was like, I don't know, 10 or so.
I have already treated 2 of them.
Yeah. And it was so awesome. It was like the one friend who knows me from the gym. We have the same amazing trainer. And she was like, hey, would you be willing to talk to my group of friends? And I thought, well, this is fun. I've never actually had this much of an intimate setting where it's a group of friends that sit around weekly. They play cards, or
what do they play? No, is it mahjong?
Mahjong. Yeah, they play mahjong, which I don't think is cards. It's like dominoes.
It's like
or something.
A domino thing. Yeah.
So they play their game and they talk amongst themselves, like, how about this? How about that? Oh, I'm suffering with this, or I tried that, doctor. Isn't that a great idea? You know someone who's an expert in something you're curious in, and you bring them in. It reminds me of, like, I don't know, the Jane Austen times or something, where you would have someone come and speak on a topic. And I love that. So that's what they did. They invited me to come and join them. We were there for 2 hours just fielding questions. And I was so surprised at how much they didn't know and how much they were just braving through. It was pretty shocking.
Over the years, I've had many, many women say, I've got my group of friends and I'm the guinea pig. they'll say, I found you, I'm coming, and everybody wants to know what happens when you go see the hormone zone, what happens. And then they go back and they tell them, and often those patients start kind of trickling in to see us because generally speaking, people feel better.
Yeah.
Once they get hormone replacement therapy done the right way.
And all the misconceptions about who can't try it. I'd actually like this to be like a really important talking point. Let's take a minute to highlight this point.
Okay.
I think everybody should have a consultation with a hormone expert. If they think they're not a candidate, if they think they're nowhere near it, if they think they're already on a great solution, everyone should seek to have consultations with a hormone expert because you never know how much better you can be doing.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue with this idea of advocacy.
Yeah.
That we should just say, public service announcement.
Yeah.
Everybody go in and get checked.
Yes.
Or say, seek the doctors that know how to check. The reason I say that too, because there needs to be more advocacy, which is part of the education for doctors, because many will say it, they still say it. No, you don't. I can give you hormones, but we don't need to check levels.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. I can just throw something at you. Maybe there's a cream or a patch or something. I'll give that to you if you say you have these symptoms, but there's no real checking or preemptive checking, proactive checking. None of that exists.
Or the opposite end of the spectrum, which is I'll check and everything looks fine.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you're 50.
Yeah. Right. So your levels should suck and you should feel bad.
And you should feel like shit because basically this is that stage of life.
Exactly. So, you have to live with it. And we always say you don't have to live with it. So yes, this is all about advocacy. So here we are kind of advocating for people to advocate for themselves, to go out there and look. But also, I think that there's need, and we're now starting to see this fantastic penetration actually into legislation and creating policy for menopausal women. I mean, this is just fantastic. And part of the reason they would say that it's needed is one, just the understanding of it, but that there's more options potentially out there for guys. Let's talk about sexual dysfunction. There are dozens of FDA-approved medications for men for erectile dysfunction. There are 2 FDA-approved medications for women, maybe 3, but I think it's 2 FDA-approved medications for women for female sexual dysfunction.
That's a disparity.
That's a pretty wide disparity.
And most of the people that I follow on social media that are talking about this topic that I'm interested in, a lot of times it's like a female us against them, like females against men kind of a thing. And I really don't care for that. I think it's really important, having been in this industry for so long, to recognize that men are also very undertreated. Men are also very underserved. So this isn't really about like men have always had it better than women and that's got to change. No, it's not about men having it better. But what is true is that most of the research out there is about men.
Sure.
Most of the research out there doesn't even consider exploring menopausal disease because it's not a disease.
That's very, very good point. And we've seen this so much over the years that guys also are having their own issues. We've done plenty of podcasts about it. We'll continue to do a podcast about it. Men in many, many ways are massively underserved as well. Yeah. So but it happens to be that there's a bunch of pills and things and options for guys for ED, and for women, whether they weren't advocating for themselves or it didn't seem like it was necessary, or not even necessary, not that it wasn't possible to be able to help with that. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I guess probably that's a discussion in and of itself. I'm a little bit more along the party line, and probably a lot of women are on the party line, where if it is true that the medical community, being predominantly at the time anyways, what does that mean? Historically, let's say it was predominantly men, that they were not considering women's health as a priority because the women's suffering wasn't a priority or wasn't relevant, or it was just a badge for them to bear. And I think that's probably what a lot of women think. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think that has shaped where the money has gone. But let's say in the past 30 years, that's not the case.
No, because
it's not about that. It's just about it's just about deficiency, period, across the board. So let's not spend too much time crying about why it didn't happen before. I don't really think that's a good use of our energy. I think what we should be doing now is saying, this is what we're feeling. This is what we're experiencing. How do I make it better now?
Well, that's certainly the proper way to kind of get things done. But let me just put a caveat to that. No, we don't want to overly cry over spilled milk. But I do think it's important, and we've talked about this many times, about the Women's Health Initiative. And the reason that I think it's important to always bring that up, to say, yeah, if it wasn't for the Women's Health Initiative and the incorrect association of estrogen to causing breast cancer, that we probably wouldn't be in this predicament as much as we are in this past 23 odd years. That women would have stayed on estrogen and would have, we've been able to understand this more, and we wouldn't have had a generation that suffered. And the reason I'm saying it's important to say that so we don't go through these problems again, because we went through that problem with the Women's Health Initiative. We sure as hell went through that problem with COVID. I don't know, it seems like all these podcasts we keep bringing up COVID, but it's because it's about health. And COVID was part of the reason why we are actually in this sort of waking up process that we've been in the past roughly 5 years. So it's important to bring that up, to point the finger to say, let's not repeat that. Let's learn from this process.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, it's important to learn from history, if history is being retold accurately.
Certainly within medicine and in science, because that's what they were bastardizing, was the good name and good intention and an institution of medicine and science. That's what got screwed up. And we need to understand that, to where we can continue to move forward and advocate for our own health and that of our community and et cetera. So speaking of that, one of the best advocates out there right now is Dr. Mary Claire Haver. If you're at all following anything on social media regarding hormone replacement therapy, menopause, inevitably you're coming across Dr. Haver. She was just recently on Oprah, but she has this fantastic, it's called A Citizen's Guide to Menopause Advocacy. And you can look this up, and it's a multi-page document kind of going through various policies that they're pushing forward. And with another woman, Jennifer Weiss-Wolf, who's a menopausal advocate, and she's been advocate for other things over the years. But what we'd like to do today is go through that particular document and the different policy goals that they have put forth. So there's, what is it, about 6 of them, a half dozen of them. And also some legislation that they have right even here in Arizona. So policy goal number 1, they're believing, and we believe, and that's why we're going all this, we support this, reset the record about menopausal hormone treatment. They're even saying contacting the NIH, the Office of Research on Women's Health, and tell them that you want to publicly, unequivocally reset the record with this current understanding of the data. This is huge because so many people still don't know. They don't know. If you're not, the only place I've seen it is on social media. Okay. If you're not following accounts that are wellness and health focused, and not everybody does, then you're not going to see this. So it's extremely important that we command and demand a correction. Yes. I think this is a good, I always bring this up. Dr. Macri wrote a book called Blind Spots. Dr. Macri is actually on the committee with Make America Healthy Again. So with this recent report, we did our podcast about that recent report a little while ago. And Dr. Macri is on this. And so he wrote this book called Blind Spots, and it's about medical dogma and how medical dogma dies hard. And it creates these false narratives and inevitably makes people suffer one way or another. And one of the things that he talks about is the Women's Health Initiative. He's got a whole chapter specifically on that. And he tells the story, and because he's interviewed the people that were part of this whole thing back in 2002. And the Women's Health Initiative, this massive study at the time in 2002, it had already been going on for about a decade. And in 2002, they were all of the scientists, the principal investigators, the PIs, they all go to their annual conference and they meet in Chicago. And they are all sitting there. There's this key woman and this key doctor. I'm forgetting their names, but they were the ones that were part of propagating this idea of estrogen causing breast cancer. Anyway, they're standing behind the lectern. They said, we're scrapping the entire agenda that you thought we were going to do. And now we were going to launch this paper. And they hold the paper up and it says estrogen causes breast cancer. They hand this paper to these principal investigators. They look at the data in the paper and said, the data's wrong. There's something called confidence interval that they looked at. And the confidence interval should actually be, and this is a little bit of statistics stuff, and we've talked about these things before and written about it, and you can read about it in Dr. Macary's book, but it should be either less than 1 or more than 1. It shouldn't be both. So what happened was there was this very large, what's called confidence interval. It is statistics 101. If you have a broad, massive confidence interval, the data is crap. It's just,
in other words, it means you can't have confidence in the information.
Correct. You can't have confidence whether it did or did not cause the cancer in this particular case, which because the intervention was about looking for cancer. So you couldn't. And that was like right in the paper right there. So you've got these really brilliant scientists just know what they're doing. And they said, no, this is wrong.
Right.
And then, so they said, okay, we'll give you a little bit of time. This is standing right here happening in real time. We'll give you some time to, do an addendum. So they all sat there and scrambled and started, typing away on this quick addendum because they said, we need to publish this thing. We need, but you got a little bit of time. I don't know. It was like, they gave them minutes to do it. So they collated it all, said, okay, just so everyone understands, this is what the confidence interval showed, so where we can interpret this in the correct way. They finished, they handed it over to her and she went, sorry, the courier already came. They've already printed it. Sorry. I mean, it was literally this, you couldn't make this stuff up. And so that was it. Then at that point, you were not allowed to dissent. And that's the big thing too. And that's what I was saying earlier, why I think it is important to bring these things up and point that finger so we don't repeat these kind of nonsense things again that creates this dogma in medicine that inevitably leads to people suffering, in this case, women suffering for a generation.
Without treatment.
Yes, without treatment.
Again, we had mentioned in the previous episode, or I had mentioned in the previous episode, that estrogen replacement therapy is usually met by most individual women as a no until they become so uncomfortable or so ill that they explore alternatives. And it should be the opposite. All women should approach estrogen therapy with a yes, and then go through a process of figuring out whether or not they are the candidate, and assuming they are, which is true for most women, what is the best therapy to follow.
Policy goal number 2. Catalyze a modern, equitable menopause research agenda. More research. And this is what we both want to say about this, that there's already a lot of research. It's already been there. We have been talking about it for years. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be more research because you always want to have contemporary research. But please understand that this stuff goes back decades.
Right. This is well established as true.
But it was, a lot of that research, of course, was suppressed. It was just ignored across the board. And now, people are waking up and they're not ignoring it anymore. We're bringing it forward. Policy goal number 3, update and then ultimately mandate, back to what we were saying, and mandate menopause education for providers. That's what needs to happen. I would like to know that there was even more competition out there for us, because there's people that know more and more about hormones, because that's just going to help more people, more women. So doctors do need to get educated on this. It needs to be educated at the level of the medical school, not just within the specialties. It needs to just be sort of a basic understanding, but certainly in obstetrics and gynecology.
Right. So that's what I was going to say, that even within the specialties, we've repeatedly expressed how OB-GYN surveys and endocrine surveys show that those specialists do not feel well-trained or do not feel like they are masters and therefore not responsible for women's hormones. So who is taking care of women's hormones?
That's a great point. Yeah, they'd leave them out to just go figure it out.
Yeah.
And then,
or to figure nothing out, which has been what's been happening.
but that's the majority of it.
Yep.
But some of them will continue to keep knocking on doors until they do. And then they find places like us. And there are many people that do what it is that we do and across the United States. So keep looking and do not take no for an answer.
Correct.
Regarding all this. But yes, ultimately, we need to demand that providers are getting this type of education. Policy goal number 4, make menopause treatments affordable and accessible. And again, I would say, our take is it already has been. If you find, these are affordable options, even what we wind up offering. Many of the things that we do are, not the cheapest things in the world. But with that said, really, really accessible.
Yeah, I mean that one's a challenge for me because I think that most of these therapies that you and I recommend for our patients out of pocket are reasonable expenses, and I think it's a good podcast topic. I've talked about it before, that I think we should talk about this notion of the Americans relying on healthcare insurance versus having a stronger sense of autonomy for their wellness. So this one's a little bit more funny because one of the things that I like about it not being looked at closely is that there's not a lot of rules and regulations making it difficult for small compounding pharmacies to make it affordable. Right. So the fact that it's like no one cares about it. It's not popular. Like when there's a brand of a bag company that you really like and suddenly it gets picked up by some influencer and then the bag becomes like 4 times more expensive than it used to be, that kind of a thing. I feel like that's what will happen with HRT, with compounded bioidentical HRT. So as it becomes more accessible, let it stay affordable. That's how I would reword that.
That's a very, very good point.
Like freaking birth control. Everyone and their mother's on birth control. That's affordable.
Very affordable.
And insurance companies are covering that.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be a similar concept.
And then it's then defining what is affordable. Affordable sometimes, if not all the time, is related to value. Meaning, what does the patient value? Because when they value something, they go, okay, I'm willing to do that. And we've seen this with patients. And what a great example that we've used before on podcasts is what happened with eggs. Because we always were getting the best possible eggs because we valued that for ourselves and our health and our family.
Right.
So the eggs were already, it's that black box. I forget now the name of the
Vital Farms.
Vital Farms. Yeah, that's right. And they were already around, I don't know, $8, $9, $10. And then when eggs went through the roof, we were already spending that much. It wound up actually making a lot of the conventional eggs more expensive. I think those other Vital Farms got a little more expensive too, but they didn't really change all that much because we had already saw the value of that. So for us, it wasn't like, no, eggs are not 99 cents a dozen. They're about $8, $9, $10 a dozen. That's just what it is for us because of the high quality that we saw. And that's just.
But using the same exact analogy, what I would like to see is that those high quality eggs don't have to cost me $8, $9. So is the system, is the support there in place? If we're going to get policy involvement, is the support there in place to make a good quality product easier to manufacture, less expensive to manufacture, so that we can have a variety of vendors that can afford to deliver this product and still be profitable, but not so expensive for the customer?
Yeah. Policy goal number 5, make menopause treatments free of these outdated warning labels. They just removed, at least on testosterone, they've removed the cardiovascular disease risk for testosterone products.
So
for
outdated.
Men. It was all nonsense.
I mean, it's cardiac protective. It's just baloney. So
there's already those misleading kind of boxed warnings that they have, even on local vaginal estrogen products.
So that's a good way to determine whether or not you're aligned with your doctor's treatment approach. If your doctor is saying things like testosterone is bad for your heart, estrogen causes cancer, it's almost like when you're interviewing your doctor, you're meeting them for the first time, you should ask those 2 questions right out of the chute. Because if they are giving you outdated information, they're going to do that for everything they recommend.
Else, right. Yeah, that's a great screening tool right there. Policy goal number 6, ensure meaningful workplace interventions. I thought this was really, really interesting. The idea of corporate wellness is something we've worked with over the years as well. There's more of that. We're seeing more and more corporate wellness out there, and just the corporate wellness market. It's massively growing. So that's kind of what that is. It's using your workplace environment to be able to talk about menopause and get those treatments. We can certainly say that what's the advantage of the people who work for us wind up getting treatment. And then they feel better. And then in the end, they wind up being happier across the board. They're more productive with work just because they got some basic hormone treatment.
Yeah. And, perhaps people won't like what I'm going to say, but I think it's really important from a business perspective. If you think of your employees as assets, right? They are assets, and you invest time and energy and money into molding them to be productive and mission aligned, and hopefully you get longevity out of that employment. Well, what is happening, part of this idea of the glass ceiling that women face, is that there are so many cognitive symptoms that come with being perimenopausal. There is such a decline in mental and emotional stability and ability. If you're not on hormone replacement, it behooves companies to invest in the wellness of their female employees, because they are providing expanded longevity for their asset that is an employee.
Many people know, or maybe you know or not, but I used to do massage therapy. I did that for years. And one of the first jobs I had was a sort of corporate wellness massage therapy kind of thing. And I would go around to all kinds of places of business right here in Phoenix and Scottsdale and give chair massages. And they would include that as part of their corporate wellness. And there was all kinds of, even back then, research on showing how there was increased and improved productivity, decreased sick days, all that, just by, having a once a week chair massage for 15 minutes. So yes, these kinds of the corporate wellness makes a lot of sense. Take care of your employees. So then finally, so that was the 6 policy goals right there. We just want to add that.
Super good. Well done to the team. Well done to Dr. Haver's team.
Absolutely. There are bills and legislation, and not just in Arizona. We'll talk just quickly about Arizona, but I encourage you to go through these links that we have here and check that out, because you can see a map of the United States where there's bills that some of them already passed, some are in the process of passing, that are about this very concept. But right here in Arizona, it's House Bill 2734. This would enable healthcare providers with tools to educate women on the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, and create informational materials for that. So that's a first good step towards that idea of education right there at that basic level of primary care, and other healthcare providers. So definitely check that out if you're in Arizona, and check out whatever state you're in, and try to advocate for the sake of moving these kind of policies.
I mean, if there's anything we learned from the America Health initiatives that we're seeing right now, is that it really is the people.
Yep.
It really is your vote. It really is your voice. It really is where you spend your dollar. So
and
all
like
of
you
us,
said, the Maha moms.
Yeah, the Maha. I mean, it's the moms. It's the front line, the average folk.
Yes.
We are the ones making a difference and pushing our country towards health and wellness, and being a leader in the world in that capacity. And women need to be at the top of that consideration.
Amen.
Yep.
Are you liking what you're hearing? Do you want to hear more?
Are you loving this great content, and do you want to ask us a question?
Please like, subscribe, and comment.
You can find all of our links on our social media, featured articles, basically everything we cover, at Linktree at Longevity Protocol Pod.
And if you want to understand and hear a little bit more about our personal lives, follow us on Instagram at The Sex Docs.
Here's where you can comment and ask questions that we will directly answer in our videos.
Be sure to subscribe to our Substack. This is where we get far more information for you, protocols on longevity and health, and definitely the notes for today's episode.
And finally, if you're ready to make a change, a real change in your own life, feel free to check us out at our private practice at hormone-zone.com.